take you with me to find a way to make building better speeches easier. And this covers both our speaking in Toastmasters and the International Speech Contest. So I will start with this idea. You're all familiar, of course, with this great form, aren't you? The International Judging Form. Have you ever wondered, because I do, why most of us don't really know what's on it? We don't use it as a form in Toastmasters like we should, because it's the same form for the club contest as it is for the best and the ultimate of contests, the International Speech Contest. So I've been thinking lately, why is this not the gospel for us? And as I went through it, I developed a different point of view. I realized that the details are not customer-friendly details. All right? For example, it's broken down, as you know, into content, delivery, and language. Let me take the first section, which is content, just the very first item, speech development, structure, organization, support material. That's 30% of the score. Do you know what it means? We have to guess, don't we? And all the others are just the same. Incidentally, you're all unmuted, so you're happy to chirp in as well. I don't mind. This is a free-for-all today, okay? Let's have a dialogue. So anyway,
Ryan,
Jimmy Buffett has a song called Love from Another Point of View. Well, I'm going to talk about speaking from another point of view and judging from another point of view, but with the idea of making us better speakers. So I went through this form and came up with what all these details are inputs into the speech. But what is the intent of those inputs? It's output. So if we were to look at this judging form from an output point of view, we'd be able to see very quickly and readily what's really required and what's required to have a great speech, what's required to have an international worthy speech. And this is what I came up with for speech development. Instead of that structure, organization, support material, to me, as a speaker and as a listener, the question I asked, was it easy to follow? Because that's the whole point of a structure, right? Was it easy to follow? And that's my question for the first 30% of the speech. So are you building a speech that's easy to follow? The next part on effectiveness, the way I answered that is, did it hold my attention? All right. And then the third part, which is on speech logic and so on, I said, were there any valuable ideas in the speech? In other words, was the speech worthwhile? So let's go through the first 50% of voting. 3 questions only. 1, was it easy to follow? 2, did it hold my attention? And 3, were there any valuable ideas in it for me? So what I've taken is all the input that Toastmasters throws in there, which we don't understand clearly, to saying from a judging point of view and from a speaker's point of view and a listener's point of view, this is what they're really talking about. It's easy to follow, it grabs my attention, and I got some valuable ideas out of it. And I would suggest if you put that on your next evaluation form, you'll be giving better evaluations in your club. Then the next section is on the delivery. So obviously they want to say, you know how the speech is structured. Now, what about the delivery? And the questions there are similar sort of hard to understand questions. Well, they're not hard, but they're inputs. They're not very helpful. So my questions was on the physical is, how did he look? Or how did she look? And what we mean by that, of course, is, did they have good body language? Did they own the stage? Just how did he look? It's very simple to remember. How did he look? The next is, how did he sound? Vocal variety, pauses. That sums up the whole issue. How did he sound? And the third is, how did he come across? Was he authentic, sincere, confident, enthusiastic? How did he come across to me as an audience member? because these are all the things we're trying to do. So we'll be able to, so there's the second part of this evaluation form, summed up again in 3 simple phrases. Follow the idea? The next one is language. And this is a little trickier, but to me, the most important thing about language is, was the word usage enjoyable? Did I enjoy the speaker's word usage? Did he have nice phrases? Did he use twists? Did he have repetition? Did he have neat little tricks of the trade of speaking? Was it enjoyable? In other words, did he use language well? That's it. The last one is a tricky one for Toastmasters these days, which was on, was it the correct language in grammar? Well, I don't know what grammar is anymore because, you know, if you're a woke member, your concept of grammar and what's correct usage is quite different to a person if you're a non-woke member. Or if you live in another country where English is not your first language, they come and speak. I don't know how they judge that. So I forget about that. I'd give my whole 20% there to whether the language was enjoyable and let people go from there. So by having that different point of view, we now have a very simple way of helping us think about preparing our speeches, but also to help us in evaluating speeches at a club and at an international speech contest. Now, there are 2 things that I think are missing from that evaluation form. They're buried in there, but they are not enunciated clearly at all. And the 2 criticals are these. One is that, did the speaker connect? If you don't connect, you have no effect. Connecting is more important than speaking, because unless you connect, there's no point talking. So that's a critical element. We're going to cover that shortly because it's one of the most critical things in speaking. And the second item that's not clearly defined in here, but it's the one that often decides whether you're first, second, or third in a contest, is, were you different? How were you different? What did you do differently that makes you stand out? Because if you're speaker number 1 and there's 10 speakers in the contest, how are they going to remember that you were there actually speaking? It's so easy to forget the speakers earlier on. So you've got to do something that makes people remember. So we'll come back to those 2 criticals shortly, but that's how I would sum up an evaluation now of speeches in a club and even preparing for an international speech contest. By using those little phrases, then these 2 secret sources that make the difference. Did you connect? And were you different? Those are the 2 secret sources that don't have a line item on the judging form, but it always influences all the judges. So you have to be thinking about that and have that at the bottom of the form. Okay, you with me there? Right. What I'd like to do now then is go and talk about how do we choose a subject, say for a speech contest, because everyone's always worried, well, how do I do it? What's the formula? How do I do it? We'll cover that, and then we'll come back to the connection and difference and all the other tricks of the trade that I'd like to share with you that have gone through and analyzed from world champions and so on. Okay, right. When preparing a speech, for example, say you're thinking of entering the speech contest this year, how are you deciding on your topic? Or next year, doesn't matter. Some people think 2 years out. They're smart people. How do you decide? My 3 favorite ways that I find the most effective in deciding what topic should I come up with to enter a speech contest, because this is, important stuff, are these. The first is the TED formula. Share a message. Share a message that you think will influence the world. That sums it all up. Do I have a message I believe that I want to share with the world? If you have one of those, you have something you've got passion about and that the world want to hear. So that's just a slam dunk, and we thank TED for that. It's brilliant. Now, the second is for people like myself who are pretty shy and introverted and all that sort of stuff, and not very emotive. So there's an emotive way of trying to find a topic. If you're not enthusiastic, extroversion, all that sort of thing. And that is this: take 3 emotions, any 3 emotions. There's 108 of them. Any 3, you can go to Google and find them. But 3, say for example, you want to choose happiness, sadness, pain. 3 emotions. Then ask yourself for each of these emotions, what was the worst case or the best case of being happy or being painful or being sad? What was the extreme case that stands out in my mind? Then you ask the next question for each of these 3. What do I remember from that? What was my lesson? And so what you have done by approaching your topic this way is you find something that moved you. Because moving you as a speaker helps you move the audience, which helps you connect with the audience. So you're having that emotive element in there in your speech. And you can do this many times over. Take any 3 emotions, go through those questions. If you don't come up with the right answer you want, or a speech you want, try another 3 emotions. But that way, it's a neat funnel,
Mr. Woolf,
and a simple funnel to get to a topic. All right?
Can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you, yes.
So I'm writing furiously everything that you're saying. So is this gonna be written down somewhere right?
It's all video recorded. You can sit at home tonight and watch the TV, and it's all here. But if anyone does want my cheat sheets, I have cheat sheets here, being a good Toastmaster.
I would.
Email me your address. Just say, oh, I want the cheat sheet, or just say cheat sheet. My email address is Brian Woolf. You see it on the screen, how it's spelled, Brian Woolf, just as one word, @gmail.com. Make sure it's spelled that way because it's often misspelled. All right?
Okay.
Brian.
Thank you for that. But I'd be happy to help in any regard later on if you have any questions. Just drop me a note. No problem. I've been
Brian.
doing it for 50 years, so I'm getting used to the needs and the problems that you have. Okay, the third part.
Okay, Brian, I think Charles had a question.
Oh, Charles, my good friend Charles. What have you got, Charles?
It's more of a comment. It's more of a comment. One of the things I find that helps me is that if you have something that's really burning on your heart,
Yeah.
that you just have to give out, like this speech that you just have to give.
Yeah.
I found that those are the best type.
Yes, but I would put that into the TED category.
Yeah.
It's basically you want to share with the world an idea worth spreading. That's what TED says. Okay. But it also come up into this third category. The third category is this, and I learned this from Randy Harvey, the 2004 world champion, the person who's influenced me more than any other speaker in my life, Randy Harvey, a fabulous speaker. But he said, use the WWW method to develop a speech if you're looking for a good speech. And that is the who, what, and why. What he says is take 3 people from your past who influenced you, had a big influence on you. Just any people from your past had a big influence on you. And once you've got those 3 people, of each of those 3 people, how did they influence you? What was their biggest influence on you? What was it? They taught you not to swear, or they taught you that you respect other people's religion. I mean, there are many examples. I look back in my life of people who influenced me, taught me to read, whatever they are. What were those influences? And then the third part, once you've worked out what those influences are, what's the meaning of that I can share? All right. Again, we're getting back to our core gut of what's important to us. That's the essence of a great speech. What's important to us is what you just mentioned, Charles. It's got to be something to us. And those are shortcuts to find those topics. All right. The 3 ways again, the TED method, the emotion method, and the Randy Harvey method, the 3 W's. All right. So now you can design a great speech after you leave this session today. And you'll be ready for the contest season. All right. So now let me go back. You all happy with that so far? You all with me? You're going to find you've got lots of material out there once you start having methodology like this. I mean, there are other ways, but those I find the easiest and simplest and best ways. The next thing I'd like to work with you on is going back to connection and differentiation. Connection is where you relate to the audience either in the mind or in the heart or both. That's the definition of connection. And do you know why you often drift off? Well, I do anyway. Drift off during a speech. Even contest speech, you drift off because they're not holding your attention. Why is that? Because they're not holding our attention. Why is that? They're not connecting with us. They're not using words, phrases, ideas, and emotion, and mental speed bumps to keep them absorbed. And so we have to be conscious of connection every minute of that speech. Thinking, am I filling their mind or am I filling their heart? The ideas and the emotion, the feelings, just making them feel happy, making them feel think, making them anticipate what's coming up. But those are the two criticals. And there are many ways to connect. The most important way and the simplest way that I have found, and I've only discovered this in recent years. I've learned more about speaking in the last 5 years than the previous 45 years. So that's just how it goes. The more you study and learn at Toastmasters, and the more you compete and lose, the more you learn. Because when you lose, you have to find, why did I lose? And you start learning what the good guys did and you didn't. But that's life. So let me tell you this. The first way is to usify your speech. By that, I mean your speech is filled with yous, because that's the magic word in everybody's mind. It's them, not you. For example, and you just slip these words into your speeches. You know, you already know this, don't you? All right. I bet you've noticed that God didn't call them the 10 suggestions. All right. So you throw in the you. See how I'm doing it? And also the other part besides the you is having questions. Then I don't know what advice your father gave you, but I learned from my father. Oh, can you keep a secret? Can you guess what this is? And hold up a slide rule and say, what on earth is this? You got the idea? Or how many of you were kids when you were growing up? All right, that's humor as well. So simply inserting the word you inside your phrases as often as you can. There's an old formula. You have 3 or 4 yous to every I in the speech. The emphasis is on the audience. And the reason you is so powerful is because it's a connector. It wakes up the audience. It says, hey, he's speaking to me. I got to listen. And so the audience listens. And that's the same reason why when we open a speech, we don't say everyone out there. We say each of you out there. A speech is a one-to-one dialogue with each member in the audience. So skip the idea of, you know, how many of you have done X, Y, Z? Now, the question is, have you ever done X, Y, Z? See the difference? Not how many of you did this, but have you done it? This is a one-to-one conversation from start to finish in an audience at international of 2,000 people, but it's still one-to-one. You are talking, just like having a conversation on the corner or over a cup of coffee in the office. It's a dialogue. And all you're doing is taking a dialogue to the stage and making that connection. So lots of yous are important. Questions are another way of connecting with people like that. Because again, he's talking to me, I better listen. And so we sit up and listen. So yous and cues, or what I call yous and cues. But there's also P's too. And that's participation. Getting the audience to participate in some way gets them involved. And I've got a couple of examples here I'd like to share with you if I can find them here. But I'll tell you what. For example, put your hand up if you did X, Y, Z, like we heard in the previous session. Put your hand up if you did X, Y, Z. It means we're participating. And as we participate, we have a better connection with the audience. So anytime, or say this after me, or can you answer this question? Each time you do that, you are getting participation, you are having a dialogue, you are connecting. And when you do it, if it's fun or something like that, it's also emotional. You're having a feeling with the audience. You're having a blending of emotion with the audience. So that's the power of participation. So remember, U's, Q's, and P's. Mind your U's and Q's and P's too. How's that? You got that? That's the basic formula for connecting. And there's other ways we'll talk about later on. Now let me move on to difference. Difference makes the difference. Michael Orn from South Carolina, who our last winner, 1978, Michael Orn, he was the first person to run onto the stage, the big stage. It hadn't been done before. He was the first person in that same contest in 1978 to come in front of the lectern and speak from in front of the lectern. 2 firsts. It was noticed and he won. And over the years, we've seen a lot of firsts, a lot of differences that helped the winner stand out. You all remember, for example, Darren LaCroix, after 20 seconds on the stage, he falls flat on his face on the stage. That won him the contest. Craig Valentine, he had a brilliant speech. He talked, his reflection in the mirror came out and he had a conversation with him. 2 or 3 conversations, actually. It was amazing. He talked there. Yes, yes, yes. Just a brilliant dialogue, completely creative, never been done before. And it got our attention. At the end, he had 12 seconds of silence as well. Got our attention. It was different. The judges said, creativity, bang, bang, bang. But it also added to the speech. A few years ago, we had Mohammed Qatani from Saudi Arabia. He started lighting a cigarette. And the audience actually gasped because it was different. He didn't actually light it, but it looked like he was. But he was trying to have a speech on attitudes of mind and so on. It was brilliant. The fellow a year or so later, talking about bullies, he put white underpants on over his black suit because that's what the bully as a kid made him do. And he had it on over his suit for most of the speech. He stood out. It was different. All right. Randy Harvey won because he had some great phrases and he had such exaggeration. His word power was unbelievable. And so it goes on. Lance Miller, you recall, when cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. Couldn't forget that. And who was it? Dhananjaya. I see something in you, but I don't know what it is. And what he did, he put that right through the whole speech. He threaded it through the speech. Stood out, won the prize. So there, I say, there's many ways to stand out, but those are just some of them. And even at the club level, I remember, I'm going back now 20 years. I still remember. In the club, I was a club member in North Carolina at that time as well. And Kirk Carr came out. His title was the Whales. And he came to the lectern, took out a tape measure and put it on the floor, right across the stage, 23 feet. Then he started. A baby blue whale is 23 feet long. And the whole speech was all about the blue whale. And he left that tape measure there in the front of the audience for the whole 7 minutes. I have never forgotten that. I have never forgotten that blue whale, baby blue whales are 23 feet long. Get the idea? Props are another way to be different. There are lots of ways. There's an old saying that is really epitomizes what we're talking about here. And that is, have a star in your speech. Something they'll always remember. Something they'll always remember. A Ms. Duarte came up with that phrase, and it's absolutely brilliant. Does this speech you're listening to have something you'll always remember? If it doesn't, you're not going to remember the speech either, are you? So what is it? But that has to be in our minds right from the start. So the two critical elements, if you want to get into speech contests, is connect. Are you connecting every stage of the game, every part of the way? And have something, have a star or 2 stars or 3 stars. It might be a prop, it might be the way you speak, but identify and consciously think, what stars do I have? What stars will my audience remember of my presentation today? Okay, so now you know the 2 secret ingredients. As I say, neither are on the evaluation sheet, the judging sheet, but they're sort of hidden in there, and that's how judges actually vote, because they have to give credit to creativity and so on, but that's what they have to do. I would love to have them as separate line items because they are the essentials. With me? Any questions so far, y'all? Oh, you're a good audience. Okay. Now let me get on. Now let me give you some examples to illustrate the points I was talking about. Here are some of my favorite openings, because that is another way to connect. You see, opening a speech, your audience is still thinking about yesterday's laundry and tomorrow's date and all that sort of stuff, right? Their mind is elsewhere. They're not necessarily with you. So with a good title, that helps a great deal, but you have to grab them by the collar right from the very get-go. You have to make that connection to grab their mind so they come and think about you on the stage. And so I'm going to read you 3, and we can discuss what made them good connectors. Vikas Jingran in 2007 had a speech called The Swami's Question. And he said, my hands were shaking. My throat was dry. In my hand was a letter that was going to change my life. Would it be for better or for worse? The answer was inside. I stared at the return address. Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The graduate school of my dreams. Would it begin with congratulations or you've got to be kidding? All right. And so that's how he started. He had us laughing, but what did he do for a start? My hands were shaking, my throat was dry, and holding it. He grabbed our attention. He was asking a curious question. You see, opening a speech. Here we are, another tip for you. The 2 simplest ways to open a speech and grab people's attention is either to ask a question or to arouse curiosity, or both. You can do both. That's it. It's that simple. There are 20 ways you can open a speech, but those are the 2 that have never failed me ever. I'd say 90% of my speeches start with either a question or a curiosity arouser, because I am beginning the connection process with the audience. So anyway, what was special about Vikas' speech then? So he aroused curiosity. That was a curiosity opener. You know, my eyes were shaking, my throat was dry, and in my hand was this letter. What's going to be in the letter and all this sort of stuff. But it was also an authenticity statement. We knew he was an Indian, of course, the name like that, and by his looks. But he was going for the best school in the world, or one of the best schools in the world. So he was establishing his credentials for what was going to follow. The story followed that, how on earth he got there. You see, he goes back 14 years. So he set the stage, had the curiosity, created the connection, and gave us full confidence that this is guy going somewhere, and I wanted to hear the rest of the story, like the Paul Harvey story, okay? And that's how he did it, and he won the contest. It was a brilliant speech. Here's a speech from TED that I've always loved as the opening by Pamela Meyer. She said, I don't want to alarm anybody in this room at all, but it's just come to my attention that the person on your right is a liar. And the person on your left is a liar. Also, the person sitting in your seat is a liar. We're all liars. Okay? It's a brilliant way to start a speech. Why is it brilliant? Let's go back to our formula. It's a you statement. We're talking, she is talking to each and every individual person in the audience, right? And we're all curious. Oh, I'm glad I'm not one of the liars. I'm not one of the liars. Oh, I am. And it was just a brilliant way for her to give her speech, which was titled How to Spot a Liar. And the whole speech is basically on research as to how you can spot a liar. So what a wonderful way to grab our attention from the very first words and keep us there. And you look that up on TED. It's a great one. Now, here's another one titled Reach Out. And it starts, would you help me complete an old AT&T jingle? Reach out and, I can't hear you. Reach out and.
Touch someone.
That's right. Good. Louder. Reach out and.
Touch someone.
Touch someone.
Great. Thank you. I opened that speech, which won a district contest here in South Carolina. Now, what did I do? I got the audience involved, you see. Not only was I talking about the individual audience members, but I got them to participate right from the beginning. Now, the curious thing about that speech, incidentally, I gave that in like 2005 or whatever, is that that phrase that you just remembered was last played on air in 1984, but we still remember. And why? I then go on to explain why we still remember it, because it touches us and it makes us care about other people. And so it became the base of a great speech. But the fact that people could remember it and still remember it today, as you've just demonstrated, is a powerful way to open a speech. So if you can find a phrase or something like that, the audience can answer, you have them, they're with you. And just then read them down the next 7 months of rosiness, and they will just love every minute of your whole speech. All right. So those are just three ways. Those were openings that either had a question or had curiosity or had use of fire, or all three. And that's the secret. Those are the ways to open a speech, and they do give you that connection. Let me give you a few more, because this is a lot of fun. I know you're having fun because I'm having fun. All right. Now, here's another way to connect with cues and views and whatever else. This came from Dhananjaya, who won the 2014 International Speech Contest. He starts the speech. I'm sure many of you have seen his speech, but let me explain it to you. He starts the speech by pulling a red rose out of his pocket. And he looks at it, smells it, and pauses. You and I are not very different from this flower. Guess what his first word was? You and I are not very different from this flower. Just like this flower is unique, you are unique. All of us have something special that makes us beautiful. Do you know what makes you special? See how he takes the usification and turns into the question. He's got us. And he just ran home with the prize. He didn't have us. Second place was a long way behind. It was brilliant. He had us from the start. And he had this threaded phrase, as I mentioned before, I see something in you, but I don't know what it is. And we loved it. And after the speech, that was something to remember. After the speech, there was in Kuala Lumpur. After the speech, people were asking each other afterwards, I see something in you, I don't know what it is. If you can have a phrase that people will say after the speech, you got them. You got them. Okay. Now, I'll now give you something from Darren LaCroix. This is the great fall on your face speech. That is important, not just for falling on your face, but for the yous and the questions in his opening lines. Okay, let me start. Can you remember a moment when a brilliant idea flashed into your mind? It was perfect for you, And then all of a sudden, from the depths of your brain, another thought started forcing its way through the enthusiasm until it finally shouted, yeah, great idea. But what if you, bang, and he falls on his face. See, you, he falls on his face. And then he said, what do you do? Question, when you fall on your face, do you try to jump up and hope no one notices? Or are you more concerned with other people think, and so on? What can you learn about? He had about 20 yous in the first opening paragraph. He was talking to the audience, and he had our attention right throughout, even apart from falling flat on his face. So think when you write your next opening to a speech, how many yous can you put in there? Because you are talking to each individual person in that audience. Great. Now, what about some ear-catching language? These are some of the tricks now. This is where you get scored well at the bottom part of the judging sheet. What words are tickling the audience's ears? And here's one from my friend Vikas again. In part of his speech, he says, his mother was taking him to this old swami because she was worried about her son not doing well at school. So she takes him, but he says, we visited the old part of Calcutta in India, where the houses were so close, sunlight was a myth. I have never heard anything so beautiful and graphic in my mind. That is in my mind. That is sheer brilliance. We visited an old part of Calcutta where the houses were so close that sunlight was a myth. Now, what he did there, besides beautiful phraseology and contrast and everything, another little trick you should be aware of, and critically important, is that our minds think in terms of a picture gallery. After a speech, there are a number of pictures on our wall from the speech. And our job is to make as many scenes or vignettes as clear and as sharp and as vibrant as we can make them, like that had there. Why? Because we remember the vignettes. We remember the pictures even more than the words. And when you remember the pictures from the speech, you remember the speaker and you remember the speech and the lesson of the speech. And you remember to score the person highly on a contest, right? It all works together. So vignettes, building vignettes in your speeches is critically important and very helpful. Here's another one with words from a fellow that competed against Vikas that year. He says, he was talking about his grandmother. And he said, Grandma, now there's a word filled with memories, most of them good. And the rest of them, well, good for you. And he holds his backside because Grandma used to give him a few little wallops, you know. But just a neat way of twisting and creating a picture about Grandma. And also relating it to our own lives, because I'm sure our grandmothers all walloped us occasionally or clipped us on the ear or something like that. But I don't believe we're all purely pure. Okay, now here's another little trick that I heard from a contest, several contests in recent years, and it's a neat one to try. It's called the repetition of a conjunction. Now, isn't that good stuff? A conjunction is and, if, or, something like that. And here's a guy who came third several years ago at International. And this is what he said. As the volume of a voice gets louder, the pitch of a voice gets higher, and the volume gets louder, and pitch gets higher, and louder and higher, and louder and higher, and louder and higher, until only dogs can hear the frequency coming from the body. But it's the repetition, and. It grabs people's attention. Repetition of words grabs people's attention, and it adds excitement to the speech. And people can see it. So you're getting their attention. You're connecting. You're entertaining the audience when you do that. So write that one down. Ear-catching language, and that's the repetition of a conjunction. Then hear about this. I've talked about, we haven't really talked about twists yet, have we? Oh my golly gee. That's, to me, the third part of the tripod of excellence in a speech. Twists. Now, a twist is quite quite simple. For example, my plane left at 4:47 and I didn't. All right, going along one direction and you change direction. Or my first job after leaving college was as a hydration specialist. I was a bartender. All right. So those are the idea of taking person down a road and then changing direction is a classic way, again, of connecting with people because it makes them laugh. Many twists make people laugh. The other part about that is a twist is one of many speed bumps, I call them mental speed bumps. Those little things that you do or say that wakes the audience up, because it just so happens, and it happens to me, it might happen to you, just might, that sometimes people's mind starts wavering in the audience and they're not really listening to you as well as you'd like them to. All right. So you've got to have little mental speed bumps to wake them up and take them back from thinking about tonight's shopping list or anything like that, get them back on track. And so you have if you can do little things that wake them up and shake them up, they will come back to you. So what we can do here, what I'm saying is twists are a great way to do that. And twists can be short or long. So let me give you an example of a longish twist, which again, from a South Carolina contestant in the mid-90s, who did a wonderful job, but he talks about himself as a 7-year-old boy. He was in a foster care situation, all right? And he came in, he had a bad report card. And he sort of shuffles in on the stage. You see him talking about it. He says, I showed my mother my report card. It was my worst ever. She smiled. She said, I'm proud of you, son. I can tell from your grades that you don't cheat. All right? So what he did, he had us all set up there and we go through, and that's like a 5-line twist. You set them up, and there are lots of those sort of lines you can do that really work well, and I'd highly recommend them to you. I'm not sure if I've got any more here, but those are the sorts of things that make things different for you. So now, the twists, there are so many of them. I've actually written an article on them on my website, brianwoolf.com. There's a 5 or 6 page on twists and so on that you can read and see how others use them. That would be helpful to you. Another trick of the trade, of course, is using triples. I'm sure you all use triples, like Emil Griffith, tall, slender, quietly spoken. The rhyme of threes works all the time and adds a rhythm to your speech. But you can also use triples in a bullet point fashion, which gives power to your speech, which connects more strongly with your audience. For example, here are a couple that I like. This is from Otis Williams, who won in 1993. The graveyard. He's talking about the graveyard being the greatest source of waste in the world, in the sense of greatness. The graveyard contains books that will never be written, songs that will never be sung, ideas that will never be shared, right? If you're emphasizing a point, have 3 examples, always helps. Or Craig Valentine, he was talking about tough times he was having. He said, I had a dead-end job, a dead-end relationship, and a dead-end life. I needed help. So repetition, dead end, dead end, dead end, and then I need like the twist at the end. So he got us. Here's a little more about repeating words, because this is also very easy. It's like the repetition of the conjunctions. A repetition of a word is so easy to do because whatever you're writing, just find an opportunity to repeat a word. And for example, here are some that I like. The answer to that is nothing, nada, zero, rien, nichi, niente, diddly squat, and zilch. That's it. All right. So you take a word and give it in 5, 6 different languages. You get the point across. It's entertainment for the audience. It's connection with the audience. Or here's another one. His father would wait in a bright, shiny BMW to pick him up. And there I was, waiting for my dad to pick me up. You just emphasize a point. You change the pace for the audience. It's a mental speed bump because you change the pace. The audience wakes up, they get out of their reverie, they can sign on again. Here's another one I heard a couple of years ago, which I loved. We talk about these grand speeches that are going on. Change, change, change. The world, world, world. Now, he's not really pushing forward his great idea with that, but he is connecting with the audience. It's a connection factor. So using words like that is connecting. There's part of it builds the speech, but you've got to take time out to connect. And here's another one that I like. He stood in the dark under data-filled screens and read to us word for word for word for word for word. And I think you'd all relate to that, having been to PowerPoint presentations. Right, now we're getting close to my answer. Let me take a few questions, and I'll come back and put things together. So if you unmute, you can ask any questions you want at this stage, and then we'll come back and wrap things up. So any questions at this stage? Gosh, I love this. Oh, yes. Jim?
Hey, Brian. Jim Hatchell here.
Yes, Jim.
You know what? I love all this material, and I appreciate what you're sharing with us. And having competed in a number of contests, it really is going to help me in the future as I try to sharpen that saw. One question that I have, and you sort of shared a lot of information from a lot of different speakers. I guess the difficult thing for me is trying to be that different person, that different speaker, to bring that different message. There's so many speeches out there today. How do you find that uniqueness that is going to make you different from other speakers?
Jim, that's a great question. We all struggle with it. The way I answer that and handle it myself is what Morgan MacArthur, who won back in 1996, 4, one of those years, said, the more personal the message, the more universal the truth. The more personal the message, the more universal it spreads. So if you can talk about something relating to you, and that's why those examples before, if you can talk about something to you, no one else can do it, and only you can speak about it. And not only that, when you speak about it, your passion comes through, and not just your passion comes through, but the beauty about talking about something in your life, and that's why I had those experiences about checking out your different experience you've had as to be a base, is that you connect with the audience, because when an audience member hears you talking about your life, they translate it to their life. So it can be as simple as traveling around the world or skiing for the first time or whatever. But if it's related to you or your family, those are the secrets. You or your family, you will have the greatest chance of success. And if you look at the world champion speeches over the years, I'd say 80% of them are about themselves, relate about themselves. It's stories about themselves and their families. Because when you're delivering it, you don't have to remember the words, you don't have to remember the set lines, because you're reliving it. And that's what makes it so easy. One of the worst things that can happen is that you have a perfectly delivered speech, but you are not connecting because you're not sweating under the armpits. I've never forgotten the first time I got to semifinals, I thought I had the best speech in the world, and I came third. So I had to go and see this wise old guy. I said, what went wrong? What went wrong? It was brilliant. He said, it was a brilliant speech. but you weren't sweating under the armpits. In other words, I wasn't connecting. We are not in a contest or even anywhere in a club to give a written speech. We are there to connect and share a message. And we share a message. That's how you do it. It's got to, if it comes from you, it's so much easier and it connects. Okay, great question, Jim. And congratulations on your win last year. That's wonderful. Hope you're entering again this year.
So,
All right.
Brian, I thought they said they gave us 16 minutes, but I'm getting a message that they'll be closing it down in a couple of minutes.
All right, in that case then, let me just say thank you so much for being a wonderful audience. As I say, if you want my cheat sheets, write to me. But also the other thing, everything I've said today is in my book here. I've taken all the material from that one book, The Speaker's Blueprint. That's on Amazon. I'm not here to peddle it. I'm just wanting to let you know you don't have to take all these notes. And it's a gold mine information. I've spent all my life just researching and understanding, and I just wanted to share it with everybody. Okay, I now hand it back to our coordinator,